Good morning. Welcome to King's Report News Hour, the 15th day in the ninth month of the 16th year of Changi Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Chiniko Kyungjin-mun. Let's go right to our trip around the kingdom. And right now, in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, 38 degrees with fog, and dense fog will lift this morning. Good, that's always nice. Partly sunny, high of 62 today. Tonight, clear, a low of 37. Father's hometown, Cheongju, North Pyongan province, in what is today North Korea, 39 degrees and cloudy at the moment. And low clouds today, tonight, low of 36 tonight. And then tomorrow, low clouds continuing, high of 54. And in the northeast of Pennsylvania, at the Cheongung Palace, 41 and sunny. Right now, 59 for a high today, sunny to partly cloudy and windy. And coldest air so far this season on the way early next week. But we still have a few days before next week. Anyway, so just watch out for that. 59 for a high. Tonight, clear to partly cloudy, a low of 33 at the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas. 44 and clear. That's pretty chilly for Texas in November. And pleasant with plenty of sunshine today, high of 79. Tonight, clear, low of 54 at the Suncheon Palace in Korea. 52 and some clouds right now, mostly cloudy tonight, low of 45. Tomorrow, sun and areas of high clouds and pleasant, high of 70. At the Gunma Palaces in Japan, 49 and mostly cloudy. Chilly with increasing clouds, freezing temperatures in the normally colder spots, low of 39. Tomorrow, sun through high clouds, high of 64. At the Guangzhou, Guangdong province in China, 64 and light rain, mostly cloudy and a low of 62 tonight. Tomorrow, partly sunny and warmer, high of 82. All right. And let's go to Father's Word. See where we are today. We're in the book on true parents. Okay. True parents, here's section. We're in chapter 6, and section 6, chapter 6, section 6. And point 6. So, oops, 666. Well, there we go. Anyway, okay. All numbers are restored, so we don't need to worry about that stuff anymore. Okay. Chapter 6, section 6, point 6. Which is subtitled, We Must Inherit the Tradition. 지금까지, which means until now, 인류는 인간이 어떻게 될지를 몰랐습니다. Human beings did not know what was going to happen to people, to humanity, what was going to happen to humanity. They didn't know what 내가 어떻게 될지를 몰랐습니다. They did not know what was going to happen to me. In this case, this is the general me, right? Well, it's not talking about himself. He's talking about each person saying, I don't know what's going to happen to me. Okay. 역사를 몰랐다 이겁니다. They did not know history. 지금 현재가 어디에서 무엇이 되는지를 몰랐습니다. They did not know what the current reality what was going to happen with the current reality. 앞으로 어떻게 될 것인지 목적을 몰랐다는 것입니다. They didn't know what was the purpose? What was the purpose? Where things are going to go in the future? 왜 그러냐? Why is this? 참된 부모 조상을 못 가졌기 때문입니다. It was because they did not have true parents or true ancestors. 그렇지만 우리는 참부모를 모심으로 말미암아. But because we are attending true parents, 나는 역사를 알았다. We can say, I understand history now. 하나님과 나와 어떻다는 역사를 알았다. So now I understand the history of God and myself. 이렇게 되는 것입니다. That's what happens now. Okay. 또 현재를 알고 미래를 알았다 이겁니다. Now we understand the present and we understand the future. 알았을 뿐만 아니라 그러한 전통을 이어받을 수 있다 이겁니다. So not only do we understand, but we can now inherit the tradition. Okay, great. Fantastic. Wonderful lesson for today. Thank you, Father, for the lesson. Okay. Which brings me to actually, it's amazing how Father's quotes just naturally segue into what's going on. Today is election day in New York City and in a few other places, but especially the mayoral election in New York City is getting a lot of attention because polls, well, what I think about polls, but if polls are worth anything, the polls seem to be saying that this guy, Mamdani, is going to be elected the mayor of New York City. And it's an interesting situation. Some people are saying, well, this is suicide for New York. It's political suicide for New York, social suicide for New York, financial suicide for New York. But it is interesting that this is happening in a what appears to be a clean and democratic election. Um, just in case you're not aware, Mamdani, of course, is a Muslim who is also a communist, which is a pretty rare breed since Muslims are supposed to hate communists because Muslims, of course, believe in God, communists don't. So it's kind of a big divide. But anyway, this guy happens to be both. And, he's saying, well, there will be government operated grocery stores, which sounds to me as though the New York City government is going to be setting prices. It sounds like, I don't know, we'll have to see how that's going to work. Buses will be free. Childcare for children under 5 will be free. And rents, some rents will be frozen. And how's he going to pay for this? Oh, yeah, he's going to put an extra tax on everyone who makes more than $1 million. So, I think most of us can understand how this is not a very realistic plan because people who make more than $1 million, of course, are not going to sit around waiting to be taxed like this, just waiting to sort of have their wealth or their income confiscated like this. But it is interesting on a number of levels. Some people have been saying, well, this is the best thing to happen to Republicans because it will show that socialism is a failure. And so, New York City will start voting for Republicans again. They used to. I mean, Rudolph Giuliani, one of President Trump's strongest supporters, was once mayor of New York. In fact, he was quite a popular mayor of New York at one time. Not so long ago, actually. When was that? The 80s or so, 90s? I'm not sure. But back then, he was quite a popular mayor of New York. So New York has come, I don't know if you can say has come a long way, but it has certainly changed. It has certainly changed. But it proves what people have said all along about democracy, that the weakness of democracy is that when people figure out that the majority can vote for anything they want, even if it is short-sighted, that's what they do. And sure enough, that's exactly what's happening. We want free stuff. We want free buses. We want free childcare for kids under 5. We want rents frozen, and what are the landlords going to do? Landlords going to do? How are they going to pay their property taxes? We don't care. That's their problem. Um, it's exactly shows you the eventual end result of democracy, as as it has played out in history again and again and again. So is this going to mark a resurgence of conservatism in America? Maybe not so fast, maybe not so fast, because um, maybe not so fast. It could be that this will spread. So when things don't work out in New York City, as I'm sure they will not, who are they going to blame? Well, they're going to blame Trump, and they're going to blame sort of the whole Republican Party and so forth, and all conservatives. And so they will say, well, this just shows that we have to have the whole country under this kind of socialist regime. New York City, as a city government, cannot print its own money. It cannot issue its own money. So the modern monetary theory does not work in New York City. Modern monetary theory only works in a country um, that is printing its own currency, that is, creating its own currency. And then modern monetary theory says basically that the country can then, create as much currency as it needs to do whatever it wants without regard to taxation and without regard to even borrowing. It doesn't have to borrow, just create the money. And if you're worried about inflation, then the way you take money out of the economy is through taxation. And the role of taxation is to um, make it more difficult for the private sector to compete with the government sector, with the government controlled uh, industries or operations. So that's, as I understand, the basic theory behind modern monetary theory, which is, a completely crazy theory, but this is something that some people are now adopting. Um, and New York City would try to do it if they could, but of course they cannot create their own money. But they can borrow, or at least as long as the bond market allows them to borrow, they can issue. I guess they can issue bonds, and we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see what happens in New York City. Let's go. There are a number of sort of stories going on. And by the way, today, just before we get into the stories, let me just remind people that in Pennsylvania today, there's an important election going on. Three members of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the sort of progressive members, are up for possible, I guess what they call it, renewal or something like that. Anyway, voters in Pennsylvania have the opportunity to go out and vote no on the three names that appear on the ballot today. And if any of them receives a majority of no votes, then they will no longer be a member of the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court. And then that will create a vacancy for possibly more conservative people on the Supreme Court. So that's an important election that's going on today. Also, New Jersey and Virginia are voting for governor and I think some other state offices. So some very important elections are going on today. So please check your local election board to see what is happening and uh, go out and vote your conscience. I guess that's the best way to put it, right? Best way to put it. Okay. All right. Breitbart is calling today Mamdani Eve. Zoran, that's Mamdani's first name, says he will defend illegal aliens' right to live in New York City. Yes, of course. Yes. And pledges to strengthen our sanctuary city laws, he says. And this is the guy there. He will defend the rights of illegal aliens to live in New York City against President Donald Trump. So, you know, as far as ICE is concerned, I guess this will create a concentration of targets. Anyway, vows to fight Trump funding threats. President Trump is saying that uh, if Mamdani wins, he will cut federal funding to New York City. who was it previously? Was it Reagan cut funding to New York City at one point? I can't remember. There was something like that previously too. That was what happened, yeah. And Trump urges New York City to vote for Cuomo. They say that politics creates a strange bedfellows, but Trump and Cuomo. Just a couple years back, no one would have imagined that Trump and Cuomo would be would be speaking to each other in friendly terms. Oh my goodness! All right, and then oh yes, Pelosi has something wonderful to say about President Trump. He's a vile creature. He's the worst thing on the face of the earth. You know, Pelosi during the first term, Pelosi kept saying that as long as Trump is president, I will not step down as Speaker of the House. So when he was, forced out of the White House, then she said, "Okay, yeah, I won. I won. I can. I'll step down as Speaker, but I will continue as a member of the House, representing my district, and sort of, I'll still be the center of the Democrat Party." Well, now rumors are swirling that she's about to resign. Not resign, but that she's about to well, that she's about to retire. I'm sorry, not resign, but retire. In other words, that she will not run for re-election next year. And so now she's bitter because she's about to retire, or I think she's at a point now where it's very difficult for her to continue. And the guy is president again. I mean, how is fate playing such a terrible trick on her? She wanted to be around to lead the fight against Trump, and now he's going to be free from her clutches, and he's going to be able to do whatever he wants as president, and it's terrible for her. So I think she's cursing fate more than anything. Boy, these people. I think sometimes the level of maturity is pretty low. I think. Um, and so anyway, let's see here. Uh, White House to launch website exposing criminal illegal aliens who have received Medicaid. Okay, that's a good uh, public relations ploy, I guess. 17 Nigerian Christians killed in attacks hours after Trump called out religious persecution. Right, that's terrible going on there in Nigeria. And let's see here. And uh, and women's soccer pro faces team backlash for calling on league to adopt to gender standards. The Olympics used to have gender standards. In other words, what was it? I think it was the amount of testosterone or estrogen or one or the other. There was a certain standard in the Olympics, but I've probably done away with that. I don't know. Okay. And here, so SNAP benefits are now being partially funded. About half of benefits are going out this month. So we'll have to see what happens there. Yeah. All right. So yeah, all sorts of crazy things are going to be happening now. Yeah. Okay. Michelle Obama. All right. She's still in the spotlight. She has a new hairstyle. Yeah. And Pelosi's possible retirement causes stir among Democrats. There, you see there. Look, she's using a walker. Yeah, she's using a walker. Yeah. All right. Uh, okay, um, let's, and by the way, the Texas governor says that he's going to put a tariff on people trying to flee New York for Texas after Mamdani wins. Not sure how that would work. The Constitution guaranteeing interstate commerce and all that. But anyway, he's saying it. As I say, politicians like to say things just to to get more clicks, get more votes, and this may be part of that. But let's take a look at what Trump thinks about what's going on in New York City. Trump backs Cuomo and threatens to cut federal funding if communist Mamdani wins New York City mayor race. He endorsed Cuomo on Monday while threatening to withhold federal funding from New York City if Zoran Mamdani, who he labeled a communist, wins the mayoral election. In a lengthy post on Truth Social, he warned that the city would face total economic and social disaster under Mamdani's leadership. If communist candidate Zoran Mamdani wins the election for mayor of New York City, it is highly unlikely that I will be contributing federal funds other than the very minimum as required to my beloved first home because of the fact that as a communist, this once great city has zero chance of success or even survival, he wrote in the lengthy post. And Cuomo says that Trump will deploy National Guard slash New York City funds if Mamdani wins mayor's race. And in the past, uh, uh, I think President Trump has said something similar to deploying National Guard or not allowing Mamdani to win or something like that. I think at the primary stage, that's what he was saying. It can only get worse with a communist at the helm, and I don't want to send as President good money after bad. It's my obligation to run the nation, and it is my strong conviction that New York City will be a complete and total economic and social disaster should Mamdani win. He added before claiming a win for Mamdani would be a complete and total economic and social disaster. The president's post also marked his latest attempt to guide to New Yorkers. A vote for Curtis Sliwa, who I guess is that the Republican candidate? Anyway, uh, he says don't vote for him. It's a vote for Mamdani. Because Cuomo is running as an independent. He originally ran in the Democrat primary, lost to Mamdani, and so after that, he said, "Okay, I'm going to run as an independent instead." And the polls show that Mamdani is ahead. I think many polls show him ahead with a comfortable margin, but Cuomo at least is claiming, and I think some supporters are claiming that Cuomo is closing the gap on Mamdani. That's what the Epoch Times says anyway, as New York's prepared to head to polls in the mayoral election, which will start, I guess, well, maybe it's already started. Now it's 7:25, 7:22 in New York. So perhaps the polls have already opened at 7 o'clock. I don't know. Okay. Mamdani maintains his lead in the polls, but the president's endorsement of Cuomo could reshape the race in the final hours before Election Day 2025. So we'll see. We'll see if President Trump is able to lift Cuomo over the finish line like that. Okay. Trump urges voters to support Cuomo on the eve of New York City mayoral election, and we'll see. But just as a sort of from position of sort of observing what is going on, um, I think we have to be prepared for the possibility that yes, Mamdani will win, and that even if he fails, even if New York City fails, that this will actually spread to other major cities in America. So why are New Yorkers apparently about to make what is, to many of us, an obvious bad choice? Uh, there is a growing resentment in America. People say it's a K-shaped economy. In other words, K-shaped economy means that there are some people who are getting richer and richer, while there are some people who are getting poorer and poorer and poorer. And this is creating a great deal of resentment, and they're blaming capitalism. And people who are wise will tell you that, well, it's not capitalism, it's crony capitalism that is at fault. And especially in New York City, where you have people we have so they blame billionaires. All right, so they say billionaires are bad. We don't. There shouldn't be any billionaires in a fair society. Well, that's partially true because I think there, and people have pointed out that there are two types of billionaires. There are some people, Elon Musk is one, Steve Jobs, when he was alive, I guess he was a billionaire anyway. He's another person who have created value. They created, Steve Jobs created the iPhone, and people around the world say, "Wow, this is fantastic. I want one too." So they buy, the iPhone at expensive prices and make its creator a billionaire. Or I hate to say it, but even Bill Gates, I'm I'm using a product of Bill Gates's work right now. Uh, his morality, his view on vaccinations aside, he did create a great deal of value. Then there are those billionaires who do not create value. They are people who become billionaires by manipulating the system. Specifically, I'm thinking about, ironically, the billionaires on Wall Street, who basically, is sort of by financial shenanigans, I guess you can say, by doing all sorts of things with derivatives and things like that. The type of people who caused the 2008 financial crisis and then did not have to face any kind of accountability and got bailed out by the government. These people are bad billionaires, I would say. The Kane type, no, 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 not Kane type, because Kane is actually also necessary. I think these are the unnecessary billionaires, shall we say, unnecessary billionaires. Um, and by manipulating the system like that, they've helped to create this incredible resentment against the system as a whole. And so people who are, on the downslope on that K pattern are going to vote for someone like Mamdani, who says, "Yeah, I'm going to come along and I'm going to make the system work for everyone, for you." And he says, "I'm going to make it work for everyone." He says, and people who have feel that they've been disadvantaged will say, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I think I'll vote for this guy." So, well, um, historians will say that this is the logical end of democracy. And if that is the case, then perhaps we are seeing just the beginning of what will eventually become a more widespread movement, not only in large cities around America, but in the country as a whole, perhaps, over the next 5 to 10 years. I don't think we can take it for granted that the Republicans are going to win win the next year's midterm elections, that they will maintain their majority in the House, slim as it may be, or that they will take the majority in the Senate. And I don't think we can assume that J.D. Vance or whoever runs for the Republican Party will win the presidential race in 2028. It could be that between now and then, between now and next year, next November, next year and November 3 years from now, it could be that this resentment against crony capitalism, which people seem to equate with capitalism wrongly, but still do, that this will spread to the point where a majority of American voters as a whole, are going to be making these poor choices. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But let's be careful and let's be prepared for what may be coming, because as President Trump says, it can only lead to political and social disaster, which means what? That means that there will be, if this spreads to the country as a whole, then this will lead to social disruption, social instability, and economic disruption. Uh, Sky high inflation if the government just starts printing whatever it needs in order to cover the needs of the Democratic base, whatever they want, their frozen rents, their childcare, their free whatever, this, that, and the other. Um, now, and President Trump as many, or as I guess most Republicans have tried in the past, is trying to enforce some sort of a financial discipline on the country, noting that okay, right now we have $38 trillion now in national debt and federal debt. So there has to be some sort of discipline. Unfortunately, discipline requires that people endure pain, and people don't do that very well. Sometimes they do, like during World War II, there's rationing in America, right? All sorts of items were rationed. And people endured it because they believed in a cause. And that they believed in a cause because they were, well, frankly, they were educated by all sorts of propaganda videos that they should sacrifice in order to defeat the evil Hitler and the Japanese and the Germans and so forth. So they believed in that cause, and the majority of Americans did. And so they endured. And then when the war ended, that was about the last time I think that people rallied around a cause like that and endured for the greater good. Uh, so we cannot expect people to, or it's not realistic to expect people to be um, uh, willing to endure sacrifices like that when they've discovered that now they can vote whatever they want for themselves. Uh, I said we cannot expect, but we should expect actually, and in Choniguk surely we will be able to expect people to uh, endure sacrifices for the greater good. But that's because in Choniguk, well, why is that? Well, that's because in Choniguk, the government will not be involved in welfare or education or the medical situation at all. And so people will have to rely on their state governments or local governments or families to resolve all these situations. And so perhaps there will be a stronger sense of sacrificing for the greater good. Perhaps there will be. We'll have to wait and see. Right? Maybe it'll take time for that to come about. So anyway, New York City looks like on the precipice of doing something foolish, but uh, well, we'll see what happens. But this may be the judgment that comes on America, and uh, over the next 2 years, or over the next year and 3 years, we'll have to see. But certainly, we need to fight against it, and I hope that Blessed to Families in America will continue to try and educate Americans about the foolishness of or the short-sightedness of these kinds of choices, but it may be a tide that is rising, and well, we'll have to wait and see. Okay, let's see here. Let's see what Epic Times is saying about this situation here. A final undecided vote, as final undecided voters make up their minds to cast their ballot for New York City's next mayor. Hold on a second. Okay. I got to pop up there. Margins seem to be tightening on the eve of Election Day, with Democratic nominee Zoran Mamdani maintaining a lead and his opponent making a last-ditch effort to consolidate support behind former New York City Andrew Cuomo. The race is among the nation's most watched on Election Day 2025, as a victory for Democratic Socialist Mamdani would represent a significant political win for the Democratic Party's left flank. Yes, so AOC, I'm sure she's very happy right now what's going on. She is a congresswoman from New York City, and this is the kind of thing that she's been fighting for. For months, Mamdani has been projected in polling to be on track for a double-digit win, and these polling numbers have held in the final stretch of the race. So you got to ask yourself, so how is it that AOC has been winning, right? She won, I think she's won, twice now? Or is it three times she's won? I think it's just twice so far. But people in her district are voting for someone like AOC. And, to the rest of us, meaning you and me, that's you really can't understand what's happening there. But that just shows that there are people who have deep resentment against the current system and are voting for anyone who is going to bring them free stuff. Okay, they see AOC is doing that, and now they're going up to the mayoral level. And there have been rumors of AOC perhaps challenging Chuck Schumer in next year's Senate race. Um, yeah, in the Democratic primary. That's possibility has been held up. So if Mamdani wins, perhaps that will create a momentum for AOC to do exactly that, for her to enter the Senate. Whoa! But yeah, this is, remember, there is a curse on the providentially central countries, Japan, of course, and Korea, and perhaps now America. However, on the eve of the election, President Donald Trump, who has been outspoken in his opposition to Mamdani's policy agenda, urged Republicans to back Cuomo over Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa, which could throw off the pollsters' predictions. Here's what to know. The candidates, initially the race was set to be a showdown between Mamdani Cuomo, sitting New York City Mayor Eric Adams, and Sliwa. Since then, the race has tightened after Adams, who has faced corruption allegations during his tenure and maintained his innocence, dropped out in September and threw his backing behind Cuomo. Mamdani has run on a platform of city-run grocery stores, free buses, rent freezes for stabilized tenants, free childcare, a minimum wage of $30 per hour by 2030, a tax on those making more than $1 million annually, and a Department of Community Safety. He's also running on Trump-proofing New York City through measures such as strengthening New York City's status as sanctuary for illegal immigrants. He has won the backing of progressive figures like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Bernie Sanders, both of whom similarly describe themselves as democratic socialists. Now, Obama has not endorsed him, and it's interesting to think about why that is. He's not said, but I think for one thing, Obama figures why expend political capital on a race that's already been won? In other words, it's already a sure thing that Mamdani is going to win, so why should I sort of risk my reputation or anything like that on this guy? And any election is a risk, so that may be one reason. Maybe he's sort of holding out, saying, "Well, later on, if things don't go well, then I can say, yeah, I know I was against him from the beginning, but I couldn't really say so." But this kind of thing. That may be one possibility. But Obama still is the what I refer to as the general secretary of the Communist Party in America. He's still in charge of the communist revolution in America. It's just that he's sort of sitting back right now and not being very visible right now. He did say that he was going to be a sounding board for Mamdani, whatever that means. Cuomo's platform includes increasing affordable housing, increasing the size of the New York City Police Department, expanding access to mental health services, and combating anti-Semitism. And it's interesting that even some Jews in New York City are supporting Mamdani, and that's an interesting situation because he's a well, anyway. Yeah, the label of anti-Semitism has been thrown around a lot these days. I want to be careful. He sought to win the support of Jewish voters in New York City. This is Cuomo, who may be alienated by Mamdani's position on Israel and related issues. And Cuomo carries political baggage from his departure from the governorship amidst accusations of sexual harassment of his female employees. Cuomo has denied the claims, and Sliwa faces an uphill battle in New York City, one of the most Democratic-leaning areas of the country. Sliwa is chief executive of the Guardian Angels. Okay, let's in the final polls taken of the race, including one that concluded on November 2, Mamdani maintained the advantage. And Atlas Intel, which has a track record of being among the most accurate pollsters in both 2020 and 2024 presidential elections, wrapped up a poll on November 2 that found that Mamdani's lead had shrunk from its previous double-digit margins down to just 5%. Specifically, that poll found that Mamdani had 44% support compared to 39% for Cuomo and 16% for Salema. This poll, which could be the final poll in the race, shows a race that has gotten much closer than it previously was. So if the 16% for Salema, of course, goes to Cuomo, then, well, he only needs, a third of actually the people for Sliwa for Cuomo to win. But so I guess it is possible that Mamdani will not win. That would be interesting too. The poll, which until recently, Mamdani had maintained a double-digit lead in the polls, averaging around 45% support. Cuomo had garnered an average 30%. Sliwa, meanwhile, had averaged around 15%. Okay. So Trump's last-minute decision to endorse Cuomo, however, throws a curveball into the race that could see radically different results than pollsters predicted. In a post on Truth Social on Tuesday, that's earlier today, I guess, Trump urged New Yorkers to back Cuomo over Sliwa. A vote for Chris Sliwa is a vote for Mamdani, Trump wrote, whether you personally like Andrew Cuomo or not, which I don't. I guess he didn't say that. You really have no choice. You must vote for him and hope he does a fantastic job. He is capable of it. Mamdani is not. Okay. Trump said that if Mamdani, who Trump described as a communist, is elected, then the once great city of New York has zero chance of success or even survival. The president also threatened to pull federal funding other than the very minimum as required out of the city. Okay. With Cuomo just 5 points behind Mamdani in the most recent polling, Trump's endorsement could push enough Republicans to switch their vote to elect Cuomo. Meanwhile, some Republicans in Congress say they're eyeing a contingency plan if Mamdani is elected. So, in a post on X, Representative Andy Ogles, a Republican from Tennessee, suggested that the 14th Amendment may allow Congress the authority to ban Mamdani from office. Well, that's interesting. I'm not sure how that would work. I guess he does. He reposted an exclusive report on the plan from the New York Post alongside the statement. Specifically, Ogles and other Republicans believe that the 14th Amendment's prohibition on anyone who, quote, engaged in insurrection or rebellion, unquote, or who has given aid to or comfort to the enemies of the nation taking office could be applied in this case, citing Mamdani's call to resist federal immigration enforcement in the city. That could be easier said than done, however. During the 2024 election, Democrats sought to remove Trump from the ballot in Colorado and elsewhere using similar arguments. At the time, courts ruled it was up to Congress to make such a determination. I don't, I don't think so. Congress, that means also the Senate, and that means you have to have 60 votes in the Senate. Thus, for Republicans to move forward with the plan, they need to win a simple majority, vote in the House, and overcome the 60-vote filibuster threshold in the Senate, right? And that would certainly take time at least, right? Congress is so toothless right now that, of course, that's not going to happen. But this thing about the 14th Amendment is getting thrown around a lot these days. So that's what the Epoch Times is saying. And let's see where there's anything else here that's interesting. Cartels control tribal lands in California, grow drugs, and impose narco slavery. Okay. And this sheriff estimates that 80% of illicit cannabis in Mendocino County is harvested on reservations. So cartels have a foothold on American territory. Well, reservation, which is kind of American territory. It's a complicated situation there. Okay. Shall we take a look at a few paragraphs of this? This sort of quasi-sovereignty that what do you call them, Indians or Native Americans? Chief, who was a very strong supporter of the three-generation kingship, preferred the title Indians rather than Native Americans. But their quasi-sovereignty is an interesting model, actually, perhaps potentially for Chunuguk, I think. Uh, but anyway, that's not what this is about. Let's look at a few paragraphs of this. Driving up this, oh no, this is so Native American sovereignty and California's policy that shield illegal immigrants have allowed Mexican drug cartels to sweep on tribal lands of the Round Valley Indian tribes, a confederation of several tribes, the sheriff said. The valley, known for illegal marijuana, grows on tribal lands, is remote and surrounded by forested mountainous terrain. It's a patchwork of tribal lands and those sold off to private owners years ago. Kendall, 56, grew up here in the 70s during the drive to Covelo, an isolated town in the valley. He talks about how the times have changed over the decades. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was a beautiful place, a lot of freedom here, he said. When we were kids, we'd be riding our horses and having fun. Every kid in this valley had a horse. We'd go out to the river. All of us had summertime jobs, hauling hay and cutting firewood. His nostalgic journey ends abruptly as he passes a burned out building with murals of missing women on its walls, a stark reminder of the violence that plagues the valley. Other banners along the road display their names and faces, including that of Khadijah Rose Britton, a Native American woman who, according to the FBI, was last seen in Covelo being kidnapped at gunpoint in 2018. Today, Kendall says there's a little bit of farming and then just tons and tons of marijuana, and pretty much all of it is illegal. We see a lot of Hispanics here when there is no work, no sawmill jobs, no grapes, no vineyards, and not much logging. They're all here taking orders to grow marijuana, and a lot of it is happening on tribal lands. He estimated that up to 80% of the illegal marijuana in Mendocino County is grown on tribal lands based on aerial surveillance and satellite imagery, revealing a vast network of illegal grow ops. So apparently, the idea is that this woman has been kidnapped and is, if she's still alive, she's being used as a slave by the cartels somewhere, whether to grow marijuana or some other worse things. Right. Kendall first encountered Mexican cartels in this country in the mid 1990s. I got a shot at I got shot at right over here, there in a Mexican grow 25 years ago, he said, pointing to a footpath through the brush. A guy pops out of a tent with a 12 gauge, there'll be a shotgun, and I'm screaming at him in English and Spanish, drop it or I'm going to drop you. He takes off running and gets a round off at me over his shoulder. Years ago, a group of Hispanics growing marijuana in the hills were digging up artifacts and just tearing things up, Kendall said. We hit this place with search warrants years ago. We got thousands of plants, of marijuana plants. Today, even though the cartels and the laborers who work for them cultivating and harvesting the illicit marijuana are mostly illegal immigrants, Kendall is not legally allowed to call in Immigration and Customs Enforcement due to State Senate Bill 54, signed in 2018 by former Governor Jerry Brown. The law prohibits state and local law enforcement from using their resources to assist federal immigration enforcement agencies, including ICE, and forbids them from asking about a person's immigration status or sharing confidential information with federal agents. Well, maybe ICE will read this article. Yeah? Today, two competing Mexican cartels, Jalisco New Generation Cartel and La Familia Macaucana, are exploiting California's sanctuary state policies and the sovereignty of native tribes to illegally grow marijuana in the country. The sheriff said the cartels have tagged their territory with spray paint in different areas of the valley, he said. Right. So, an example of that. Okay, so that's what's going on in California. So we have basically sort of America sort of rotting in New York City and in California. And of course, I'm sure this kind of thing is also going on in Oregon, Washington, and perhaps other places around the country where it's possible to do this kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we shall see. Oh, by the way, I need to update you on Hak Ja Han. The court today released her from jail temporarily. They basically gave her a 72-hour pass. She has to report back to jail by 4 p.m. on Friday, the 7th. So it's a 72-hour pass. And apparently she's going to receive a operation on her eye, is what's going on. When I saw that, I thought, to let a person go for 3 days and then tell them you have to be back, that's almost more cruel than keeping them in the jail. I mean, 72 hours, the merciful thing to do would be to give her a week, I would think. But so I think that reflects the anger. I would say it reflects the anger that the court has against her. Um, one uh, uh, American lawyer who was working in Korea made this statement that in Korea, the punishment is the process. And so it's not just Hak Ja Han that's being treated this way, but basically this is the way the justice system works. And it's an improvement over what took place in the past. And not long after I arrived in Korea, maybe a couple of years after I arrived here, one person I knew was involved, uh, unjustly involved in a murder case. He visited someone, and later that same day, that someone got killed, was murdered, and so he was detained by police as a possible suspect, and later on he was completely cleared. But after he came back from the police station, I asked him how it was, and he said, "Well, the first thing they do with you is they first start beating you. They start beating you." And this was back in the early '80s, I suppose, when Korea was still under military dictatorship. Um, so this was routine. Beating these suspects was routine back in those days, and I don't think that's the case anymore. So I just want to make the point that things have improved, but still, the, the process is the punishment, um, and she could make things a lot easier for herself if she were not so entitled, not so arrogant, but she is. And so things are getting, I would say, getting worse and worse for her. But we'll see. And they say that criminal cases last 12 to 18 months, but uh, criminal cases can last a lot longer, can last a lot longer, years sometimes. And the court has the right to keep a person detained prior to conviction for years. So we will see what happens. I think the concept of habeas corpus is kind of weak in this country. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But anyway, so right at this moment, as I speak right now, I don't know about when you're watching this, but as I speak, she's out of jail and she's sleeping in her own bed, I suppose. And I guess she's going to go in for an eye operation uh, tomorrow or the next day. And then she has to be back to the Seoul Detention Center, which is also referred to as the Seoul Prison, by 4 p.m. on a Friday. So that's what's happening with her at this point. Okay. Well, okay, now just wanted to update you on that before I forgot. And it is possible that I forget because I'm not too tied up in following that situation. Okay. All right, let's see what else is going on Breitbart in the few minutes that we have left. Check out the headlines there. Or so wait, let's not go to Breitbart. Let's go to Newsmax. Okay. So yeah, Wall Street Journal slams the Heritage Foundation over Roberts' defense of Tucker and Fuentes. This is people slinging the anti-Semitism label around, and that's always a sort of hot potato in America. Yeah, I don't want to get involved in that. Okay, White House to expand Hill briefings on anti-drug operations in the Caribbean, and he's also doing it in the Pacific as well, and sort of threatening to do some land operations in Venezuela. Some war vessels, warships of the U.S. Navy are now stationed near Venezuela. We'll have to see what happens there. Um, but you know, President Trump is also talking about getting involved in the Nigeria situation, and certainly protecting Christians is a good idea. But you just have to wonder, you know, is it really in America's long-term national interests for President Trump to be using the military in these ways? And of course, fighting the drug runners is important, and I think he's justified in doing that. He's justified in doing that. I'm just challenging the wisdom of doing it. We're using our money to, create the weapons and the ammunition to do these kinds of things, whereas we could be using our money to, develop AI and stuff like that. So I just wonder about the wisdom of getting involved in these kinds of situations. In terms of Nigeria, you know, you would think that it'd be a better thing for President Trump to urge Nigeria to allow people to own guns legally. For example, also perhaps if he's going to get involved in Nigeria, go in there with the permission of the Nigerian government, go in there and train people who are in vulnerable areas in the use of firearms and in sort of tactics to uh, resist the bandits or the Islamist extremists and so forth that are causing this kind of a genocide against Christians in Nigeria. And you know, Venezuela, uh, what to say about Venezuela? In the past, the CIA would have gone in and, bang, 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 done a regime change, but the CIA does not appear to be capable as it was in the past. Okay. All right, so let's continue looking at what's going on with the Newsmax. Okay, okay. Oh, Cheney's dead. Oh, wow, look at that. Yeah. Complication of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease, according to a family statement. Well, he was overweight, that's for sure. Yeah. 84, not that old these days. Okay. Right. And well, interesting. Hmm. Interesting. Right. It brings up back images of Iraq and all sorts of things like that. Okay. Uh, so this whole thing with Tucker, I guess Newsmax is really deeply involved in that. And Russia tightening ring around Ukrainian troops. I guess they're going to fight that out. Yeah. Hmm. Government shutdown takes toll as a congressional inaction, or government shutdown takes ties record. I'm sorry, ties record. What am I saying? Okay. The billion-dollar machine behind the No Kings movement. There are billionaires everywhere. They keep popping up. Okay. Okay. All right. Now let's. What was I going to go to before? I was going to go back to Breitbart, wasn't I? And here, Clooney says Kamala replacing Biden was a mistake. Okay, well, that's too late now. That's right. And Breitbart Business Digest, the Fed's strange new battle lines. Hmm, interesting. Shall we take a look at a couple of paragraphs there? No. Okay. All right. And the agricultural secretary reveals thousands of food stamp fraud cases, over 100 arrests. And there's going to be fraud. That's why you don't want the government involved in these kinds of things, because the private sector can root out fraud much more easily than the government can. All right, got to go. Tomorrow's Wednesday, so we will continue our trip through the OSTP lecture tomorrow. And I will see you then. God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.